It's all about taking away people's agency. I knew I could be a doctor because I knew there was a different way. These things have been disproven. I mean, that's the purpose of school. And that's a profound way of teaching somebody that people in authority don't know anything. There's only one rule that you have to adhere to in medicine, and that is
So how you been?
I'm okay. How are you? Where are you located?
I'm in Portugal in the Algarve, yeah, via the UK. So yeah, left the UK back in 2020, just the end of the craziest year that we've all ever experienced, I think. I'm fascinated about sort of like the way people's minds work, particularly sort of like maybe any kind of lived experiences they may have had in their formative years, which make them think different. Do you know the Milgram experiment?
A little bit, yeah.
Basically, the Milgram experiment is it's fascinating for me because I think we've seen quite a few examples of it in the last few years. But it was an experiment where people volunteered to go in and they were going to take part in an experiment with two people, one being an electrocutor and the other one being.
I know these.
And I've always been fascinated in the 65% of people that will do whatever they're told by someone that's in a position, perceived authority, not so much the 20% in between, but also the 15% of people that say no. You know, they've still got some sort of connection to their intuition, their instinct. So I kind of like to see if there's any sort of patterns which create these kind of people that do push back, I suppose. So I think what we'll do, if you don't have any issue with it, I'd really like to try and understand a little bit about sort of your sort of childhood. Where did you grow up, or what part of the US?
Suburban Detroit.
And what was it like there?
I mean, I basically lived in a kind of Jewish ghetto.
So tough.
No, it wasn't tough.
Yeah.
It was just Jewish.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, we were not well off. We were middle class.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it was a pretty nondescript childhood. I wrote a book about my upbringing, actually. Well, not about my upbringing, but about the ch how to raise children,
Hmm.
and a lot of it had to do with what I experienced. And uh, you know, the most important, I think, things in for me were we were in a school 80% Jews and 20% blacks.
Yeah.
They were bussed in, and they were really good basketball players.
Hmm. Hmm.
And uh, in high school, I was the only white kid on the basketball team
Right.
because I was actually pretty good. Um, and that was very interesting experience because I got harassed but I also got protected in a way by the best player on the team
Hmm.
who knew that I was going to help him get a scholarship.
Yeah. So
And
dynamic.
so that was fascinating for me. Uh, the other thing is what I talk about was I also happened to be a very good golfer.
Hmm.
I was basically an athlete. And so I grew up in a situation of a lot of pretty wealthy and accomplished people, like doctors and businessmen. You know, the guy who invented laser surgery and gynecology, he actually delivered me.
Oh wow.
And the guy who started immunotherapy for cancer
Hmm.
was one of our friends. And head of oncology and head of hematology at the major Detroit hospitals. They were all friends, and we all belonged to this country club and what was interesting for me is even though they had a huge, big professions, right? And they were, the thing they seemed to care most about was golf and particularly winning the club championship.
Wow.
That was like the highlight of every year. And they first let me play in it when I was 15. Before that, they didn't, I was too young.
Yeah.
So I played against all these, friends of the family who were adults,
Hmm.
and I won easily. And I realized that these sort of brilliant, accomplished, successful people, they didn't know how to think golf.
Hmm. Have that in them.
And I just realized they didn't know anything.
Hmm. It's a
And
realization, and that's across the board, not just in golf.
I mean, I didn't know it at the time, right? But I had experiences. I remember going to this, following this doctor who was an internist and he pretty famous like oncologist. And I'm following him in his office to get a sense of what being a doctor's like. I still remember this. Goes in the office, there's this big black woman sitting on the table, and she has a cough. He examines her and he says, "Yeah, you got a cough. You take this medicine." She says, "Why I have a cough?" And he looks at her and he says, "It's the bad air in Detroit." And she looks at him and says, "Why don't you have a cough?" And I started laughing.
Very good point.
Yeah, I because I thought it was funny, and he didn't know. He just, and I just knew that. I mean, I couldn't articulate why, right, or what was wrong.
Mhm.
I just knew there was something really wrong with these people, and so the other thing which I say, and I got this from Mr. Rogers.
Mhm.
He was interviewing somebody who was a reporter who like talked about uncovering fraud and corruption and like bringing down very wealthy people, right?
Yeah.
So he says, why did so he was talking about something totally different, which was that he had a poor relationship with his father. And he said, so what's the thing you like most about yourself? He said that I don't cower to authority.
Right.
Where'd you get that from? And he suddenly start crying. And he said, basically, my father taught me that because he was a jerk and he was the authority figure. And I realized I'm not listening to this person.
Yeah.
And that's a profound way of teaching somebody that people in authority don't know anything. And that was my story. My father was basically a jerk. And I quickly realized that you don't listen to people in authority.
No. No.
And so that's a great way. I'm not saying you should teach your children like that, because it's a little weird.
Think I teach my kids. It's like just don't assume that just because somebody is telling you something that it's true. And again, coming back to what I was saying to you earlier about instinct, something doesn't feel right, then you're okay to explore it.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, my mother said when I was 3, I didn't suffer fools gladly. I think it's just my nature for whatever that means.
Well, that answer's brilliant because it was kind of taking me. I actually had not a set of questions, but some prompts kind of taking through that because that's where I was kind of going. Is number one seeing experiences which obviously led you to the way that you currently are, the thought patterns you have. Again, being that 15% that we were talking about just now, rather than the one that is in that larger percentage of people that kind of go with the flow. So that makes sense. Did you always want to go into just initially sort of allopathic medicine? Was that why you went into biology and then you had that aha moment, or did you always intend to veer off into sort of a more alternative path?
Well, I mean, my story, my father and grandfather were dentists, and like I said, we had a very close-knit circle of extended friends.
Yeah.
Every Sunday we played baseball and had picnic in the park in the summer and went sledding, and it was very unusual. And most of them were doctors,
Mm.
and like I said, pretty well-known doctors. And I was a good student. Um, so everybody assumed I was going to be a doctor, and I didn't want any part of it. They couldn't even play golf, you know, like why would I want to do this? So, anyways, I go to college and I check it out, and I didn't like it, hated it.
Wasn't for
So
you.
I decided to try to do anything I could besides be a doctor, and I didn't know what else to do. And I tried gardening and I went to the Peace Corps and everything. And while I was in Swaziland, I discovered that there's a different way of being a doctor,
Hmm.
like Weston Price, how people eat and think and all that. And that was it's like the dam broke because at that point I knew I could be a doctor because I knew there was a different way.
Yeah.
And so it turns out I was interested in the subject. You know, I like I was trying not to be interested because I didn't like the way they did it. And I didn't realize there was another way to look at it. Once that happened, I mean, that's 50 years. I pretty much read about, thought about, looked into biology and medicine every day of my life since then.
And I also think as well, there's an element, and this you may agree or disagree. Obviously, you did a biology, you went down the route of biology, didn't you? So I think one big problem I've noticed with allopathic medicine, and this is an excuse that's used, is doctors obviously compartmentalize when they choose their specialist. And although I'm not a doctor in any way, I'm not claiming to be, have gone and certified myself in physiology and anatomy. And I think when you understand the anatomy and how everything plays into each other and influences one another, and do you know what I mean? They have this effect. You can see a bit more of a holistic picture. And I think if you then go down the compartmentalized ear, nose, and throat, heart doctor, um, then couple that with the symptom management, put a plaster on it kind of approach, then that's why they're not really impacting health in any way at all. They're literally just turning those warning signs off instead. You know, the symptoms are the warning signs from your body. And that intuitively, it doesn't feel right if you've been studying biology and learning about the human systems, I suppose.
Yeah, but that's way downstream from the problem.
Hmm.
The As I see it now, the problem is way deeper than that. And and you could argue when this started, but in an interesting sort of way, there's two fundamentally different ways of looking at the world, and particularly life or biology. One is related to Adam, Adam, that, you know, biological systems are a manifestation of a creative process, which means there's a creator and some sort of intelligence at work that's imbuing these organisms with, you know, direction and purpose and meaning and life, uh, and a whole lot of other things. Nothing is random, and there's an incredible magnificence and wisdom of the body. So that's one way. The other way, and this really came to the fore late 1800s, it's a sort of mockery that we're not made from Adam, we're not descended from Adam, we're made of atoms, atoms. And in that world, it all started in the beginning, there was nothing, and then a car backfired, and then you got everything.
Yeah.
They call it the Big Bang. And so all these molecule, all the stuff that's in the universe just came because the car backfired. And how that happened, nobody knows. And then it's just elements and they randomly move and collide, and then they form chemicals. And then these chemicals randomly move and collide, and they form bigger chemicals. And they randomly move and collide. There's no purpose, there's no direction, there's no nothing. And then you get proteins, and then you get DNA, and then you get a living cell. And then the living cell randomly meets another one, and then you get a fungus, and then you get a plant, and then you get a frog, and then you get a gorilla, and then you get Uncle Harry. Now, interestingly, Uncle Harry had to have happened at the same time as, Aunt Sue. Otherwise, the whole thing would have been for naught, right? Because this Uncle Harry can't get anywhere just by himself.
Kind of an important detail.
Yeah, right. Which is interesting. So it's like, some people have said it's like you go to a junkyard and a tornado hits it and you get a 747. but you don't get a 747, you get a male and a female 747.
Hmm.
It's even harder. And so there's only one rule in medicine when you go to so I went to medical school, right? I'm a fully trained doctor, and all that. There's only one rule that you have to adhere to in medicine, and that is everything is random and the patient has no agency.
Hmm.
It's all just chance. Why do I have cancer? Because you have a mutated gene. It's just these molecules, something happened, they got, mutated. You didn't have anything to do with it. It's not how you live. It's not how you move. It's not what you eat. It's not how you think. It's not your crappy marriage. It's not your house that you live in. It's not the uh, government that's, a criminal organization. It's none of that. It's just bad luck.
Yeah.
Or the virus got you, even though there's no evidence that there is even such a thing as a virus.
Hmm.
It's all just materialistic, random, purposeless, senseless, uh, no creation force, no intelligence. So if you get you get a fever, you stop it.
Hmm.
And if you get a tumor, you kill it. There's no intelligence behind this. And even if you say to them, so what happens if you get a splinter in your finger? Well, your body makes pus. That's an infection.
Yeah.
So therefore you get rid of the pus, right, with an antibiotic. What happens then? Well, the splinter stays there.
Yeah.
Is
Exactly.
it possible that the pus is getting the splinter out?
Yeah.
No. Well, what happens if you breathe in debris? Then you make cough and mucus to get the debris out. We call that bronchitis, and when we stop it, and then the people get worse lung problems.
Depressed.
They
Yeah.
have debris in their lungs. What happens if you keep poisoning yourself? You put it in a garbage bag, just like any normal person would, and that's called a tumor. It's not a disease called cancer. It's a strategy to encapsulate garbage that you, well, let's say stupidly put into your body. Now, sometimes you didn't have a choice, really, but you know, you mostly do.
Uh-huh. And it's not just what you're putting in, it's also your behaviors which are affecting your body's way of removing it too as well, which builds up and then creates that cough. And then you're suppressing your body's final way of ejecting those pathogens from your system by taking cough medicine, etc. So it's a
Yeah,
complete,
there's no pathogens.
but we are so disconnected. We are so
Yeah, except there's no pathogens. That's not how it works.
no.
You breathe in poisons, it breaks down your lung tissue. The bacteria come to help bioremediate it. They're not causing disease. And by the way, if anybody hears this and says, "Oh, Tom, he's an idiot," I don't want to hear uh, about you got sick or you got sick at the same time as your friend or whatever. I want a study that says you take bacteria, which do exist, you expose them to healthy people and only bacteria, and show that it causes disease.
Mhm.
Because I know there is no such study. Therefore, that thinking has been disproven. Believe it if you want, but it's like it's just believing in a myth or a superstition.
Mhm.
And that's what medicine is. They they believe DNA makes protein, genes make proteins. Then somebody does a human genome project, 200,000 proteins, 10,000 genes. Apparently, geneticists not good at arithmetic because there's 190,000 missing codes for the proteins, which has falsified that way of seeing the world.
Mhm.
But they don't care.
It's the playbook across everything. And if you can control the research process, controls the sort of narrative, I suppose. And it's the same across the board.
It's all about taking away people's agency.
Hmm.
You didn't do anything because people who say, this has got to do with how I live and how I think and how I move and how I eat, and I don't like the way this is happening, and so I'm going to do something different. And you're stealing my property and my money, and so I'm going to get rid of you because that's not the way I want to live. That is not the society that the rulers want us to live in.
Most certainly.
And what they've discovered, interestingly, this is fascinating to me, is, like authoritarian, totalitarian dictatorship is a very inefficient way of subduing a population. What's much better is democracy, because then the people police themselves because they erroneously think they're in charge.
The illusion.
Yeah, and so they police each other, which is way more efficient, right? Uh, if you're gonna control a group of 20 people, if you do it by force, you've got a big problem.
Yeah. Output.
But if you get them, the 19 of them to to police the 20th who might think differently, you're home free.
So how do you control 8 billion people? It's that obvious question that stares us in the face, isn't it? And you are right.
By having the people do it themselves.
Have you read a book called The Four Agreements by any chance?
Yeah, I know it.
Uh, there's
I
he's
oh,
talking about where that's seeded as kids, where he calls it the domestication period. So from like
yeah,
0 to 18, where we're being given these contracts that are societal contracts that we had no involvement with regards to forming, but our parents pass them on, our adult caregivers, it's that societal thing. And again, it's conditioning you to accept, accept, accept. And then at the age of 18, you are self-domesticated. And like you say, in a democracy, you're then in a perfect position to go and self-police each other, like you say, rather than see that the oppressors are potentially the other side. I say potentially just for rhetorically.
I mean, that's the purpose of school.
Mhm.
And interestingly, the founders of the public school system, Dewey and the rest, that's what they said. And it's always ironic to me. People say, oh, the school system's failing and blah, blah, blah. No, it's not. It was set up to keep people, basically uneducated and, domesticated.
Ignoring that instinct.
Yeah. And to bow to authority. And they've perfected how to do that.
Mhm.
And it's working great.
Exactly. And that leads into a lot of the stuff that I do. Again, this is your podcast, but just to give you some context, I sort of work sort of on the nervous system with breath work and that kind of thing. And again, people living those lives of quiet discomfort, with the carrot that's always just dangled in front of them enough to stay on course, they just feel this slight imbalance. This isn't what life was supposed to be. And I think it just leads to these sort of like nervous system problems and the physical issues that obviously the poor food, obviously metabolic health, etc. And I think it's all it's a big psyop, which has basically taken kind of what makes us human away from us. Again, we dream about going into this system and being a successful part of that system, as opposed to thinking, actually, I'd rather break that system and go after something that I jump out of bed in the morning for. It's
Yeah.
really that's the crux, I suppose. Amazing. Okay. Yeah, do go on.
Tell me what you want me to go on about.
Well, I think one thing I mean, you've put on there again why we get sick and what to do about it, I suppose, and that really would bolt on to kind of what you were saying there. And obviously, you've mentioned the opposing theory. I've followed terrain theory because again, coming back to what I was saying, if your nervous system is under attack, if you're stuck in fight or flight, all of your other systems aren't working, digestion, that kind of stuff. So I am a big proponent of when you are feeling low, that's when you're susceptible to things which either exist in the body or they're just a direct result of the way that you live your life. If you're someone that eats poorly, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, sort of explain to me a bit more about the terrain theory.
So, number one, I don't like to use the word terrain theory because everybody believes in terrain theory.
Mhm.
If you go to any immunologist or Del Bigtree or Kennedy or any of those people, they say, "Oh yeah, we believe in terrain and the germ theory. So if your terrain is bad, then the germs get you."
Yeah.
Uh, so that it's become a co-opted term, which that means it means nothing.
Mhm.
But the reality, as far as I can see, is the biggest psyop in medicine is symptoms are diseases. So, like I said, if you get a splinter in your finger and you don't take it out, you get pus. We call that an infection.
Yeah.
That's a disease. Uh, but even if you look at some interesting other ones, if you go to measles, for instance, there's a lot of talk about measles, especially in the United States these days.
Yeah.
What you find is, so I remember in medical school going to dermatology class, and guy would show me all these different rashes, and I would admit at extremes you could see the difference between measles and chickenpox, but 95% of them you couldn't tell the difference. And everybody's writing it down, and I'm sitting there thinking, I don't see the difference here.
It's kind
And
of
then I go to find out that the CDC, supposedly the authority on this, says there is no way to know clinically, i.e., by looking or hearing the story, whether somebody has measles, chickenpox, roseola, German measles, scarlet fever, etc. You have to do a molecular diagnostic test, which didn't exist until, say, 1990s, which means that everything before that they couldn't tell, which is interesting because how would you know? And how do you therefore have any statistic on what happened to measles or how many people died from measles when there is no way to tell whether anybody had measles in the first place? Then they say, well, there was one pathognomonic, meaning unique sign of measles, which is Koplik spots, white spots inside the cheek. Now, I happened to look into this and found there was a study in Japan 2023 where they did so-called virology exams on all these children with Koplik spots, and only 23% of them they said had measles,
right.
which means the other 77% had something else besides measles. So it turns out that doesn't tell you who has measles or not. So the bottom line is there is no entity called measles or rheumatoid arthritis. If you ask what's the definition of rheumatoid arthritis, well, joint swelling, don't feel good, hot, swollen, painful joints. And plus an antibody, rheumatoid factor, that's the hallmark of rheumatoid arthritis. Now you have the same people, exact same symptoms, no antibody. So what do they have? Rheumatoid factor negative rheumatoid arthritis. Now that's like I have, animals, and some of them go like this and go balk, 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 and some of them have four legs and a tail and they go meow. Those are featherless chickens.
So
That's the equivalent way of thinking about this. So bottom line is there's no way these besides that, they say that the agent of illness is the antibodies, right? The antibodies destroy your joints. There's not one paper in the medical literature that shows that antibodies cause any disease in healthy people.
no.
And if anybody disagrees, they're going to have to show me the paper because I happen to know it doesn't exist. So these things have been disproven. So what's happening here? What's happening is something has happened to deteriorate the health of your joint. That could be you don't eat good food, you don't walk, you don't move your body enough, you have psycho-emotional problem, you don't breathe right, you're too, sympathetic dominant. It could be a lot of things. And so then you get deposits in your joint, right? Things deposit in your joint which shouldn't be there. And then the body, in its wisdom, tries to dissolve the deposits to reform a better joint that works better. And that process uses heat and redness and swelling in order to dissolve what shouldn't be there. So this whole process is the therapy for deposits in the joint. It's not a disease. And the way I know that is because if you stop the redness and swelling and inflammation, you will have rheumatoid arthritis symptoms. You will have painful joints the rest of your life, and it will get worse and worse and worse. On the other hand, if you do what I did in medicine and what we do in our new biology clinic, is to make that more effective and stop poisoning your joint, your body can heal it, remodel it, and then you won't have that problem ever again.
100%. I say it in a lot of my content. I don't think people realize actually the potential is quite miraculous, this body, when you actually understand it and you give it the right sort of you feed, not necessarily feed it the right energy, because it's not just that, it's all of your behaviors. It is miraculous, but we kind of, like you say, we've been led down this path of symptom management. So that only sort of continually perpetuates that ill health. That the inflammation in the body is actually a reaction that your body needs, like you say, as a protective mechanism. I think this is, it's a little bit like a house of cards, our current approach. I mean, things like the cholesterol sort of debate has been sort of kind of exposed, with a lot of people going down the route of changing their diets, eating different ways, and quite a few of these narratives that we've been led to believe about all different common illnesses seems to be on very, very shaky ground. And it goes across a lot of them. And I don't like it being called alternative medicine, because at the end of the day, it's something we've practiced for millennia to some extent. But I do see a
We
lot.
used to know that the world was made out of electromagnetic energy and four elements: earth, water, air, and fire. And it's the interaction of those things that creates the world and life. And then we had what I call, in this new book, the catastrophe, which is we went from reality of what you see and what you experience to this abstract model way where nothing is real. It's all models. And, there's nothing in conventional science that's accurate.
It's
I
crazy.
mean, that's a big statement because you do have a head, and so they say that, so that's accurate. Um, but the whole, I mean, even molecules and chemicals are hypothetical.
Yeah.
Nobody has ever seen an estrogen in a woman. And if you realize how they prove that there is estrogen, you realize that they didn't prove it at all. they they take stuff and they mix it with different chemicals and they get a different chemical and they say that was in you. But they don't, because it's not scientific, meaning how do you know that that stuff was there before you mixed it with that acid?
Yeah.
And the answer is you don't. So, so the whole thing is based on a flawed intellectual foundation, the whole thing. And that's a problem. because you don't know, the doctors don't know, they don't even know what's the difference between life and non-life.
Mm.
No idea.
It's
They
crazy.
don't know why you get sick, what happened. All they can do is stop your body from reacting. That's all they know how to do. So you're lucky if you don't get worse.
Well, when I did, again, and I want to emphasize, I'm not claiming to be a doctor in any way, but when I did my diploma in anatomy and just learning about the different systems, for me, it just stood out like a sore thumb that everything that we were doing goes against even that understanding. So it's like, how could we ever have thought that this approach was going to work? And again, and I'm not a doctor, so that was kind of the thing that always hung over me. It's like, because I know a lot of people say that a lot of doctors, they're working in a broken system and they're working with the tools in their toolbox, but and I don't know what changes when they go into a specialist subject, but to me, it's like I say, so many of these protocols with my lower level of knowledge just didn't seem like they were ever going to work. Like you say, fighting inflammation when we know and accept that inflammation is our body's kind of defense to a certain situation. Attacking cholesterol when we know our brains are mostly made out of it. Again, these things just seemed a little bit counterintuitive on my level. So when you're going through, obviously, the actual full training, that must have just, I suppose, set off some spidey senses.
Yeah, I mean the problem, another way to say this, as which I say a lot, is we live in a profoundly scientifically illiterate culture.
Mm.
And the main people who are scientifically illiterate are the doctors and the scientists. So let me give you an example, because I don't expect anybody to believe me about anything. And not only that, what I suspect, if people haven't heard me before or somebody like me, well, I don't know who that would be, but they would say, yeah, how can all these people be wrong? Right? I know Fred, he's my neighbor, he's a smart guy. How could he be wrong? Let me give you an example. So, and gets into, so the cardiologist, and the way I learned is the reason you have a heart attack is you have a blocked artery, right? You got three main coronary arteries. The one of them gets blocked with plaque. The blood can't get through. The part downstream from that dies, right? That's what everybody says. All the conventional doctors, cardiologists agree. All the alternative doctors agree. Now, they disagree. The conventional doctors say it's cholesterol that's blocking your arteries, precipitating in your vessels. The alternative people think it's inflammation or, stress or something like that, not cholesterol. But here's the problem. I went into this saying, is it true that blocked arteries cause heart attacks? Because if that isn't true, then I don't need to know why you get blocked arteries in the first place. And that's like a red herring. And it turns out, so here's how I got to that. I said to myself, and I'm an ER doctor at the time. It's partly to make money while I was building my practice. So I saw a lot of people with heart attacks. And I said to myself, okay, is the blood the same everywhere in the body? Answer yes, right? You don't have special blood to your spleen or something like that. Is the artery the same? Splenic artery, same as hepatic artery, same as femoral artery, same as coronary? Answer yes. So if there's something too much in the blood that's precipitating in the coronary artery, it should precipitate in the splenic artery and the hepatic artery. And to a certain extent, it does. You get plaque in the hepatic and splenic artery. And then so I asked myself and I asked patients, do I know anybody who's had a heart attack? Yes. Bill Clinton, Dick Cheney, a whole bunch of other thousands of people. How many people do you know had spleen attacks?
Mm. Yeah.
Nobody. Now, I'm not saying gallbladder, they call gallbladder attacks like stones, but I'm talking about an ischemic attack where there's plaque, the blood can't get through, and then you have an attack like a heart attack. How about a liver attack?
That's a not
How
looking.
about a foot attack? No. So only heart and brain, we call them strokes. Why is that? So that's weird.
Yeah.
The next thing I thought, okay, and I saw this hundreds of times because I wrote a book about the heart. Guy goes to, walks up Mount Tam or some mountain, gets some chest pain. The wife says you got to go to the cardiologist. Goes to the cardiologist. You have a 95% blockage in one of your main coronary arteries. If the alternative guy says it's inflammation. If it's a normal guy says it's cholesterol, you got to take a statin drug and have a stent put in. And then he says if it blocks from any more from 95%, you're going to have a heart attack and die. Right? I've heard that hundreds of times. So I think to myself, so you mean he's got 5% blood flow to his heart? How did you walk up that mountain?
Yeah.
And you mean if it blocks from 5% to 3%, you're going to die of a heart attack?
I would say any blood around the rest of the body for that matter.
Yeah, that's no difference at all. And then I did what you would think every medical student, every cardiologist, every internist would do. Okay, the claim, that's how you do science. Science is there's a claim and you try to falsify the claim. If the claim can't be falsified, it's a belief. like the world was created in 7 days. I don't know how to falsify that claim. I don't know whether it's true or not, but it's a belief, and you can believe it if you want. But the claim that blocked arteries cause heart attacks, you can take autopsies of people who die of a heart attack and see how many of them have a blocked artery.
I'm guessing very few.
It turns out 41% do. The biggest study had done over 40 years. And of those, half of the blockages came after the heart attack, not before. So that means 20% of people who die of a heart attack, which means the worst of the worst, even have a blockage. And that doesn't mean it caused the heart attack. It just means they had a blockage. And 80% didn't have a blockage. That's what we call a fact. Now, that means the claim that blocked arteries are always caused by heart attacks, or even mostly, has been falsified. Now, doesn't matter because they still think that, and they still do stents, which have been proven not to work, and they still do bypasses, which have been proven not to work, and they still give people statin drugs, which have been proven not to work. But it doesn't matter because nobody in my training ever asked the question, excuse me, can you show me a study that everybody who dies of a heart attack has a blocked artery? Like you would think that would be a normal thing to ask, right?
Goes back to our schooling, though, like you mentioned earlier, we've been trained not to do that. We've been trained to memorize from the person above us that we see as the almighty.
Yeah, he said it was from blocked arteries. And it makes sense. The blocked artery blood doesn't get through. It sort of makes sense. I unblock it by putting a tube in there, a stent. That makes sense. Then you do a study and show that people with stents don't live longer, they don't have fewer heart attacks, they don't have fewer hospitalizations. And even in the Lancet 2018, they do a study where they took half of the people, they put a stent in, the other half, they told them they put a stent, but they didn't. They just took it, put the thing in and then took it out. And they had the same amount of chest pain 8 weeks later. So it's been disproven, but we're talking $50 billion a year, and they don't care. This is scientific illiteracy. And that's where we're at. And I don't think you can run a world on people who are either deliberately or maybe but just whatever reason are unable to grasp the facts, or once they have the facts doesn't mean anything.
I think also that system is obviously it relies on the fact that 99.9% of the general public really are illiterate to that science. Okay. And again, because they're not trained doctors, they haven't gone through that. And again, we've also been taught not to question. I was working in the corporate world. I had this thing. It was like something went wrong with my car, took it to a mechanic. Something happened around the house, got a builder in. And obviously, you got to do that for specialist stuff. But there is some things that you can turn your hand to. And again, I think we live in this world where so many of us seem to have this limitation that actually you can't disseminate some information. You can't take a little bit of responsibility for the stuff you're putting in your body, whether it be the stuff your doctor's giving you or the food you're buying from the supermarket. And far too many people I've heard in the last 5 years have this kind of, I think it might just be like a comfort blanket where they go, well, why would they do that? And how would they do that? How would they do that? How would they pull the wool over 8 billion people's eyes? That means I don't need to ask questions now. Carry on as before.
Yeah, it's interesting, the mechanic, because one of my analogies here with one of my favorite subjects, which is, quote, virology. So if you say, so let's talk about some facts. So there's allegedly all these thousands or maybe millions of different kind of viruses, and the measles one makes you get measles, and the chickenpox one makes you get chickenpox, and who makes you get. So if you ask if you say, how do you know there's frogs,
Mhm.
right? You go to the ecosystem where you think there are frogs, like a pond, and you look and you see if you can find the thing that you have identified as a frog, right? And if you find it, you say that's a frog.
Yeah.
And then if you want to understand what it's made of and you're a mean person, you can kill the frog and dissect it or watch it, see whether it eats flies or whatever. You can do that with a hammer, right? How do you know there's a hammer? You go to the ecosystem where you expect to find a hammer like a toolbox, open it up, see if you find a hammer. And then if you want to know what it does, you can hit a nail with it. And you could do that with your arm. So you make sure it's not just your arm moving that makes the nail go in, etc. So, okay, you get all these people, take any so-called viral illness, herpes, chickenpox, smallpox, and you look through the person, their lesions, their mucus, their stool, their blood, whatever, to find this thing called a virus. It is indisputable. We have 220 some uh, letters from the CDC and the NIH and et cetera that we have never found a virus in any biological fluid of any sick person. And they all agree. All virologists will agree with that. If you say, show me chickenpox, scrape the lesion, find the virus, can't do it. Which is weird because if somebody said, I looked through every pond in the world and I never saw a frog, you would be hard pressed to believe there's frogs. And they say, well, I know there's frogs because frogs eat flies, and I measured the amount of flies before and after this pond, and there's less flies afterwards. That means there's frogs.
Mental gymnastics.
So that's what they do. They say, okay, we can't find the virus in your fluid ever. There's not enough to see, they say. So we take the fluid from the chickenpox lesion, we put it on a cell culture, and we put bovine serum and calf serum, and we put in antibiotics to kill the bacteria which aren't even there. And then we put in chemicals, and then we see in the cells die in 3 days. That proves there was a virus.
Yeah.
And then, amazingly, they do the whole thing with the cell culture and the serum and the chemicals and the antibiotics, and nothing from anybody with chickenpox, and the cells die in 3 days. Exactly the same. And yet they still say that's the proof that there's a virus. And now, here's the thing I want everybody to do. This is the analogy with the mechanic. So go to your doctor tomorrow and say, Doc, how does a virologist prove the existence of a virus and show it causes disease? Any virus. He doesn't know. Go to your mechanic and say, I come to the red light and my car won't stop. Could you check my brakes? And the guy says, what's a brake? Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not going to that mechanic.
Definitely not. I see it. That's a brilliant way of putting it. I also always like to try and use analogies to break it down. That was perfect. Absolutely perfect. That brings me to a question I have. I do want to cover a little bit about the heart is not a pump, if you don't mind. But I do have a quick question that sort of kind of bolts on to that. Obviously, there's change or a supposed change going on in the States. And I think the States is worth mentioning because obviously trends do tend to sort of spur from there, with like I suppose the Maha movement. Um, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, what are you pessimistic? Are you optimistic about the future? Because the reason I ask is I saw that they came up with this big discovery on Tylenol and things like that potentially causing or affecting ADHD, and it was like being celebrated like a big win, a big change in sort of some of their strategies. But then what they did is they recommended another pharmaceutical as the way forward to treat it, and I mean, instantly everyone was arms up. I was like, that just sounds like negotiation.
I actually the I've renamed the Maha movement. It's actually should be called the haha movement
Yeah.
because the joke is on you.
Thank you. Exactly.
The whole thing is it's a sham, and So, for instance, they say, okay, we're gonna take the red dye out of Fruit Loops. Oh, good. Now I can eat Fruit Loops. Well, first of all, so now it's supposedly safe to eat Fruit Loops. The second thing is the reason for this, and the whole Kennedy family and legacy is all based on increasing the power of government. So as soon as you agree that the government, which is basically a criminal organization, has the right to tell you what you can and can't eat, even if it's something that now, of course, to sucker you in, they will start by telling you something to eat which you shouldn't eat in the first place. And then you get the people who are willing to be suckered in line. That's the goal, to keep the people on the reservation. So, but what you've agreed to is the principle that the government has the right to tell you what to eat. And so then the next people come in and say, by the way, you can't eat butter or you can't grow turnips and I went out and picked raspberries from my garden and you can't do that because raspberries have ellagic acid in it and that's not good for your foot and so you can't eat raspberries.
Setting the precedent, basically.
The what?
Setting a precedent so that they can then use
Yeah.
it forwards to, and again, you're the ones actually asking for it, so you don't even realize.
Yes. So it's all that's the brilliance of democracy is they get people to ask to be um,
Abused.
terrorized.
Literally asking, begging to be abused. To be honest, I say that a lot to people because I have a lot of friends that are quite political. I mean, obviously, UK politics is a bit different, but they always put everything down automatically to incompetence. And I'm like, don't get me wrong, there is a level of incompetence there. I mean, these people are handpicked for a reason, you know. But I actually see orchestration in almost all of it. And actually,
It's not incompetence. They're
yeah,
brilliant.
I was about to say you have to take your hat off because it is as vile and as disgusting as it is, abhorrent as it is absolutely amazing to get, like you say, someone to actually be asking for that punishment. Give us the
Yeah.
take our
I
power.
mean, the whole, and I was trained in medicine. It's a brilliant thing. You cannot say that the person's actions had any agency, any cause, any reason for what their problem is. Interestingly, except if you smoke, because then you're a dumbass. For some reason they got smoking got it's like they had to have one thing that was so obvious that they had to blame it on, otherwise they'd lose credibility. Everything you can be a pedophile, a drunk, a cocaine abuser, dumb as hell, and you can be a doctor. But if you say, well, what did this person do that led them into this problem? You're done.
Yeah.
And once you do that, and once you have this un, unexamined materialistic phenomena, you believe in atom, atom. You don't know how they proved whether there's an atom or not. It's interesting because I've looked into this fair amount. One of the leaders of the atomic theory, a guy named Schrodinger, said, if you looked at an atom, you'd never see an electron. You think, what? Uh, and when you go to look at this study that they proved there was a nucleus of an atom, I mean, they take a thin layer of gold, they shoot a light through it, 99% of it doesn't scatter, it just goes right through. And they say that's because matter is made out of these tiny little balls called nuclei, and everything else is empty space. Which is why, because your hand is made of empty space and the table is made of empty space, you can stick your hand through the table. Except you can't. And then they find out that the reason that this only 0.01% scattered the light was because they had impurities in the gold film.
Right.
So there is no evidence of atoms or nuclei or electrons or and the molecules with their stick figures and all that. It's all hypothetical models.
Yeah.
And so they just wander through this mental concepts with no relation to reality. They make up receptors on cell membranes. And then like me, I go looking for a photograph of a receptor in a cell membrane, like opiate receptors and serotonin receptors. And, that these are hugely important concepts in conventional medicine. Not one picture of a cell membrane ever been published. Why not? Too small to see. It's like one of my favorites, by the way, is a quantum bilocation. You've heard of that.
No, I've not.
Things are at two places at the same time, they
Okay.
say,
Okay.
right? So I thought that was great when I heard it because I had bought this beachfront property and I thought I could have my house be at both places at the same time. So I asked a physicist, he said, "Oh, Tom, you're such an idiot. It's too big." Okay, well, how about my cat? No, it's too big. Cats can't be a two-play. How about a frog? That's smaller than a cat. Nope, too big. How about a mosquito? Nope, too big. How about a bacteria? Too big. How about a nanoparticle? Nope, too big. So when does it not big enough? When does it like become small enough so that it can be in two places at the same time?
As soon as you can't see it.
As soon as you can't see it. So I said, how do you know how do you know it's not in 10 places at the same time?
Thing
Because
is,
you can't see it.
this kind of conversation just reminds me of so many conversations that I've had with again people that are expert in certain areas about so many different things. I mean, it could be thinking about it could be thinking about space, the universe. It could be thinking about bacteria in our guts. Every time it always comes back to these things that are unmeasurable or unprovable, but we just have to accept it. And I think that comes back to, again, disempowering people. Something really stood out for me the other day. I was watching a podcast.
It's a belief system.
It is a belief system. It is. And I think there's this elitism that comes with certain aspects of education, I suppose, what we were saying earlier. I don't know if you've read the book by John Taylor Gatto. I think it's
Yeah, I know.
brilliant book, but it kind of overlaps with the pharmaceutical side of things in my brain. And I was watching an interview, and it was Terence Howard, who's got some out there ideas. He really has. I'm not somebody that can judge whether they're valid or not. He seems to put a good, articulate argument across, and I think he should be spoken to. And he was talking with Eric Weinstein, again, a very sort of well-known sort of academic. But the thing that stood out for me is there were a few things in there, as wacky as it was. There was a few things that he said, "There's legs here. There really is some legs with these ideas," which I was really shocked by. And he was like, "Great, okay, how do we move forward?" He said, "Well, you need to get it peer reviewed." And he was like, "Great, how do I do that?" He said, "Well, here's the problem. You don't have a PhD, so as such, I will never view you as a peer. So as such, you will never receive a peer review." And it just stood out for me. It was kind of like, I get that you need to be qualified to be able to drive something, but we shouldn't be in a system which basically curtails ideas because of the person that came up with the idea. And that to me just shows, again, a control mechanism which is set up to make sure that only the stuff that they want to get through gets through, but also creates that elitism at the same time. Terence Howard had some great ideas, and he's got this guy that really believes that he can talk down to him, even though he's acknowledged that some of his ideas they could actually change the way that we look at the entire universe. It was kind of a big thing, but that just stood out for me. Is that something that you sort of experience or you see in that industry at all? Again, with people that
I actually just did a webinar that included peer review stuff yesterday. And it's because there was a guy, and I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, Peter Boghossian, I think, became a professor like a sociology at Portland State. And he was appalled at the, you know, DEI type of thinking. So he decided to um, publish, to write papers and get them published in the peer-reviewed thing. So, like one of them was the size of a dog's genitals, predicting the sexual orientation of the owners.
Yeah.
Uh, and he got it peer-reviewed and published.
A
And
few,
then he wrote 8 more papers. One was Mein Kampf, and he substituted Jews, whenever there was Jews, for white men.
and they allow
And he got it published in a peer-reviewed journal. And he did 8 of those, and he said he was getting better and better at it. And then he got outed by the Wall Street Journal. He
Brilliant.
couldn't. So I'm actually thinking of doing that with virology, because I'm convinced that climate change deniers have a viral infection in their amygdala.
Yeah.
And so we're going to try to prove that and publish it in a peer-reviewed journal.
Also need to back up the other claim that people that are into exercise are right wing. You've got to
Yeah.
back that up with a peer reviewed paper because I'm sure they would go with that one. There's been some crazy ones that have tried to curtail conversations, that's for sure.
So that system, is very efficient. It's very good at preventing anything that's true from being published and therefore uh, sort of into the common vernacular of the people.
Exactly.
That's what it's there for.
It's one of those things that you need to be taken seriously, but actually, if you look at it deeply, there's nothing serious whatsoever about it. The
You
big,
cannot be, because I tell the story of, so because people say, well, how do they do this? Like, how do they get all these smart people? So I just think of it like this. Let's say you're a pretty young virologist, 40 years old. You got a tenured position, $150,000 a year doing virology research. And someday your good friend happens to listen to me and say virus is no such thing. And he listens to it. He said, this is bullshit. And he decides he's going to do the studies which we have laid out to prove it. We have a whole viral. So he does the studies properly, and he does them again and again and again, and he proves that we're right. It's easy to prove. Anybody could do it. So he writes a paper based on disproving virology, right? So he goes to the head of the department and he says, look, I got this paper here. I want to show it to you, see if you can find any flaws in it. So he shows this guy the paper, a guy reads it, said, yeah, perfectly well written. You got it, everything right. You did all the controls, just like they said. And by the way, you're fired. So then he goes home to his wife. Wife says, how was your day? That was good. I wrote this paper and I showed it to the head of the virology. I proved that virology's a bunch of baloney. And then what happened? Well, I got fired. So how are we going to pay the mortgage and send the children to Harvard and my coats and my Lamborghini? And well, I thought I'd be a carrot farmer. But you don't know anything about carrots. You never can't even grow a tomato, like a house plant. Yeah, well, I think I'll do something honest for a change.
yeah.
Like, that's not going to happen.
No.
So even if he said, yeah, because we've had people in various these privately say, you know what, they're not going to do it.
Their licenses are on the line if they are even sort of struggling.
Their life is on the line.
There's also another one as well. So when I read that Weapons of Mass Instruction, I think it's called that book, I was looking into some studies, and it was really weird because there was a study from the university where I'm from in the UK, Portsmouth University, and it was around the time of the 2020 events. They thought they'd done it was like a bit of a gotcha because what they'd done is they'd analysed the people that had taken the shot and analysed the people that hadn't. And what they come to the conclusion is in the ones that took it, far more of them were likely to have had a university degree. So they were celebrating it like, look, the intelligent people know what to do. But there was a study being run at the same time, which I can't remember the link. I need to find it. But they also did the same study into people that had like entrepreneurs, MBAs, people that had gone into business, people that had done it off their own back. And it was completely the opposite. It was the majority of those. So what they were saying is people with the equivalent life experience type mindset, as opposed to following through education and having that extended exposure to a person of authority, asking, can you go to the toilet when you're 20, 21 years old in a lesson? It really just meant that psychologically they were far more likely to believe that person of authority. And they went further and they said, even if that person with the PhD was talking about something that wasn't their subject, that person was still likely to give more weight to that. And so I think it's like you say, such a finely tuned psyop because it really is the long game, isn't it? I suppose you're incubating these kids and spending at least 20 to maybe even 30 years to make sure they just perpetuate this same system and don't ask questions. And they're the ones that are intelligent. They're the ones with the badge, and they're the ones on the front lines doing this every day. So normal people like us will go, why would that happen? How would that happen? So it is ingenious as much as it is awful.
Yeah, the Jesuits figured this out 300, 400 years ago.
Yeah.
That's why they started the whole university system.
Yeah.
And I tell you, if anybody wants to learn about school, the best person, besides Gatto maybe, but Ivan Illich, who wrote a book, Deschooling Society. And one of my favorite Illich quotes is, he says, school is the place where if you do well in school, you get the dubious privilege of being allowed to consume more school until you've consumed so much school that the only people left you can talk to are people who've consumed a similar amount of school.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
that's how the virologists have their own secret language. Nobody supposedly, except a few people like me, understand what they're talking about.
It's
It's like the quantum physicists. They have their own code language for nonsense, just pure nonsense.
it's been the war on creativity, creative thinking, hasn't it, really? Again, you don't get very good industrial workers or cubicle workers from people that, like you say, use their imagination and their creativity for their way of thinking. I suppose it's dangerous. That's why all these kind of movements were shut down over the last 100 years as well. That's why things like the flower power movement was so badly demonized with crazy, crazy tactics. So, I don't know. So, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of healthcare?
Of healthcare?
Yeah, I'm joking. I think the reason the part I'm optimistic about is people taking individual responsibility. We're not seeing it in obviously population levels, but we are seeing a lot more people that have gone, do you know what? I'm going to start finding my own feet, and they might have to kiss a few frogs to find that prince. Get the right method. But there is more people taking a bit of responsibility for their actions. How they feed themselves, their general behaviors, etc. I don't think it's going to come from the actual system itself.
Yeah, no. I mean, I don't spend any time being pessimistic or optimistic. To me, it doesn't matter. But what I do is, okay, so I have a certain point of view. We call it the new biology, which means there's nothing there but, energy and water and all that. And how does that work in medicine? And then you know, like I hate to use the word teach, but expose other people to it. And then we form a new biology clinic. So we get 7 or 8 practitioners and then other kind tuning fork and, emotional freedom and movement and breath work and all this stuff. And we start treating people based on reality. Because when you go to a doctor, they're treating you based on theories.
Yeah.
And by the way, disproven things. Like you have a virus, say you need a shot to, or you have an immune system, which they made up to cover, is a cover story for the fact that not everybody who gets a quote virus gets sick. So you got to have an immune system.
Yeah.
And so they're suppressing your immune system or whatever. So we don't do that. So I don't worry about being pessimist. I just say, okay, let's form this clinic and see what happens. Interestingly, we got full originally with the practitioners we had. So I put out a call. Does anybody want to join us? We got like 77 applications,
Wow.
and I didn't expect that. But But one of the problems in medicine is the doctors now graduate with like $400,000 in debt. So it's like the virology story. So you get a job working in the ER, you get 300,000 a year, you can pay off your debt in 15 years. And then you say, I discovered that this blocked artery thing is bullshit, and there's an herb you can use to treat heart problems is much better. Oh, it's great. And by the way, you're fired.
Exactly.
And how am I going to pay my 300,000 in debt? It's your problem. Back when I started, like I never worked uh, for anybody except a little bit as an ER, like I said, to make money as I was building my practice. But so it was totally just hang my shingle up and whoever wanted to come. That doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
And in the UK, I don't know much about but I mean, they have criminalized medicine. They call it National Health Service. Uh, but it's a criminal organization running healthcare. And if it's hard because I say criminal because a criminal is like if you're walking down the street and somebody comes up with a gun and says, "Give me your money or I'm going to shoot you," we all call that a criminal activity. But if you're minding your own business and somebody comes and says, "Give me 30% of what you earned,
Yeah.
or I'm going to put you in a cage," we call that government.
Exactly.
Now, the only difference really is the criminal at least has the decency to realize and accept that this isn't really a nice thing to do. I mean, it's a criminal and I got reasons for it, whatever. Whereas the government, they have us convinced that they're the good guy. So once they steal your money, you don't have another 10% to go and buy health care from somebody you want. I mean, some people do, but a lot of people don't. So it's hard to make a living because of the criminality built into the system.
100%. I think you're completely right as well. You can sit there and worry about being pessimistic or optimistic, but you can only really control what's in front of you and what's in your ether, and
Yeah, I don't worry about that.
just focus on what you can and build your own community, like you say. We do very similar here. Me and my wife, we have retreats, mind body retreats, somatic movement, obviously breath work, meditation, sound healing. And that sort of opens up some of the other sort of theories that have always got my attention, I think, as well, like the EMFs. And I looked in 2020. I don't know why I did it, but when things happened, I just decided to do two searches. And these searches are quite funny because I can't find them anymore. And it was two simple searches. One was the history of radio, microwave, telecommunications, and electromagnification. And the other
Yeah,
one was our history of pandemics. And bugger me if they didn't just line up like this.
yeah,
The reason it was really interesting is I tried to do the same search about a year later. And yes, you can find the information, but it's kind of like putting a jigsaw together to try and
yeah,
work them out. Yeah, and I thought that was extremely interesting what we've got at the moment. And yeah, I know that we are beings of frequency. One of my main things I'm a proponent for is grounding. Connecting to the earth,
yeah.
what sunrise, that the real simple things we've lost touch with. But yeah, this is kind of mind blowing. So all the sort of things that my listeners will definitely be very very interested in. Excellent. So obviously you've mentioned the biology clinics. I know you've got a few things on the go at the moment. You've got the new book. Is it six books or is this number seven?
I don't know, something like that.
Brilliant. How'd you have the time? How'd you have the time? But yeah, so what I will do is obviously if there's anything else you want to get out to the listeners, any message, that would be great. And obviously I'll include everything in the show notes as well, your links to everything. Although I'm sure you've got a very large following and people are obviously know where you're at. But is there anything else that you would like to sort of mention before we
Yeah, I mean, just that we are offering an option now that I don't, there's definitely other online clinics, but most of what's called wellness or alternative medicine is just, so you have inflammation and the normal guy gives you Tylenol, they used to anyways, or Advil. And so this guy gives you turmeric.
Yeah, CB.
But but what's really key is the thinking.
Yeah,
And that's not to go on about the virus story, but that's why the virus story is so key because it tells you whether the person can think or not. And anybody who believes in viruses does so because they're just either ignorant or they've never looked into it or they have nefarious interests. Um, that's the only three reasons there are. And you do not want to put your health in the hands of somebody with those three interests for some crucial topic like this.
no, exactly.
And so nobody who works in the new biology clinic is ever going to tell you, well, the reason you have ringing in your ear or you're tired is you have an Epstein-Barr infection. Uh, because unless you know how they came up with that, it's just so interesting to me that we went through medical school and nobody asked, how did they come up with this Epstein-Barr virus? Like, what was the evidence that there is such a thing? Because because here's the key, and if I tell people now, if there's anything that I'm trying to do myself and that you should try to do, I don't like the word should because you can do whatever you want, but spend a day or a week or a month and, well, never explain anything to yourself except by something that you can actually experience.
Yeah, yeah,
In other words, example. So, should you eat tomatoes? Yes, because tomatoes have lycopene in them, and lycopene is good for prostate cancer. So, I'm a guy, I'm going to eat tomato.
mhm,
Number one, you don't know that is not an experience you have of lycopene, a chemical in a tomato. And even the whole research on whether lycopene is good for prostate cancer is flawed and mostly baloney. And so we go through life, oh, I like this person because it activates my parasympathetic nervous system. I mean, you don't know that. Rather than say, the reason I eat tomatoes, I like tomatoes, and if I eat a tomato, I feel better after I eat it, so I'm going to eat tomatoes. And by the way, I grow tomatoes, and I know they're not poisoned, and that seems good to me.
what we did for a few million years before science.
Yeah,
we
I don't
we
know about the few million, but we did it for a while.
but I mean,
So do that with everything. If you like being around somebody because it feels better, or they're a nice person because such and such, everything you can experience. Now, we are being bombarded with every single, that's an exaggeration slightly, but every single explanation. Should I eat turmeric? Yes, it's got curcumin in it, and curcumin inhibits the NRF2 pathway, and the NRF2 pathway is activated with rheumatoid arthritis. Meanwhile, there is no rheumatoid arthritis. There's no NRF2 pathway, and the whole thing is baloney. But that's not to say if I eat turmeric, my knee feels better.
yeah, yeah.
You will get so much further in life. Just try it for even one day. Never make an explanation except something that you actually can verify based on your own experience. And then do it another day. And I'm trying to do that more and more in my life. I do not want to make uh, conclusions or propose models or mechanisms because every time I look into it, okay, I'll look into the Nerf 2 path. It's,
Yeah.
it's not, there is no Nerf 2 pathway.
Two,
They
two,
made it up. It's a model.
two words which, like I said to you earlier, that have been kind of messed with. the instinct is the first one. We've been told that that's something to kind of ignore. And anecdotal has been also been tarred automatically. It's like when something works and it's worked for a long time for a large group of people, just because there's no research, it gets labeled as anecdotal and can't be trusted. Yes, it needs to be verified. Of course it does. But I think we need to realize that your anecdotal experience is worth something. Again, if you go to a doctor and they give you a medication and anecdotally you feel worse, you feel worse. So don't do
Yeah.
it. Eat a certain food and you live a certain way, you feel better. It's working. Trust.
And of course, you may need to verify that with somebody, like you live near a park and then one day you see a flying saucer and you say, "Oh my God, we're being invaded by aliens." And then you ask your friend, you say, "Oh, that was a frisbee tournament that was happening." Right? So you can be fooled, and that's why you verify, did you see that? And this happened as famously with the medicine that I'm like most known for, Strophanthus, which is a reliable treatment for people like with heart disease, angina, etc. But in the 60s, when it was being used, and you would have people come in, you'd give them Strophanthus, and they suddenly could walk, and they wouldn't have chest pain, and their heart attack stopped. But it had no effect on plaque.
Right.
And I've had so many conversations with well, uh, Strophanthus has no effect on the artery being blocked or not. Right. But you gave it to the guy and he didn't have chest pain anymore and he seemed normal. And even the function that we use to measure the heart seemed normal again. Yeah, but it can't work because because those problems are caused by blocked arteries and Strophanthus doesn't unblock the artery, so it can't work. Yeah, but it did work because the guy felt better and his numbers everything's better. Yeah, but it doesn't work. And that was the end of it. So
But
it doesn't matter what you think. When you go to the doc, doesn't matter what you think.
when they're measuring against faulty and potentially even corrupt sort of research or expectations or ways of doing things, and it's always set to fail, isn't it? So going
Yeah,
back to the mobile phone industry, they always say that it's below safety levels. Well, it's because you've set the safety levels too high, artificially too high, and you've done it with the engine
yeah,
as opposed to the health professionals that are actually sounding the alarm. So again, the untrained eye, the people that have been sort of disempowered, that they don't look past that. No, this is what they say here, so that's what I'm going to do.
yeah. There you go.
This has been a fascinating conversation. I really do appreciate your booking agent reaching out. I'll copy all of your links in as well. So obviously I will send people your way.
Okay.
Enjoyed this. Have a great
Thank you.
bon fin semana, as we say here.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
The alternative experience.
The alternative experience.
The alternative experience.